My parents sued me for buying my own house. My mother did not congratulate me when I bought my first house. She looked at the photos I had sent in the family group chat, enlarged one of the kitchen pictures, and then called me instead of replying. For a few seconds, all she said was, "It's bigger than I expected." I remember smiling because I thought she was impressed. Then she said, "You know, Claire, that should really go to Daniel." Daniel is my younger brother. He was 30, married, had 2 children, and at that point had been renting a townhouse about 20 minutes from my parents. I was 33, single, and had just spent almost 6 years saving for the down payment on a 3-bedroom house that was not especially grand, not in a glamorous neighborhood, and definitely not something anyone had handed to me. I laughed because I thought my mother was making one of those family comments that are rude enough to sting, but familiar enough that you learn to pretend they are jokes. She did not laugh. She said, "You don't need 3 bedrooms. Daniel has a family." I said, "Mom, I just bought it." And she answered, "Exactly, so now there are options." 6 weeks later, a process server knocked on my door. I was standing in the hallway of the house my parents thought I should give to my brother, holding a stack of court papers with my name printed across the top. My parents were suing me, not because they had paid for the house. They had not. Not because their names were on the deed. They were not. Not because Daniel had ever lived there. He had never spent a single night there. They were suing because, according to them, money they had given me years earlier created a family interest in what I had later built for myself. And underneath the legal language was the same rule I had grown up with. Daniel needed more. I could manage with less. For most of my life, my parents never called that favoritism. They called it being practical. Daniel was 2 years younger than me, and even when we were children, everything about him seemed to come with an explanation. If he forgot homework, he was overwhelmed. If I forgot homework, I was careless. If he got a B, my parents took him for ice cream because he had worked so hard. If I got an A-, my father would ask what happened to the missing points. None of those childhood moments felt large enough to confront on their own. That was the problem. Every example was small enough to excuse, and the explanations were always the same. Daniel needed more help. Claire could handle herself. By the time I was in college, I had stopped asking why the rules were different. I had become useful. That was my role. When I got my first part-time job, my parents praised me for being responsible. When Daniel got his first part-time job, my parents praised him for finding himself. I paid for my own phone and most of my school expenses. My parents still helped me, and I want to be clear about that because the story makes no sense if I pretend they never did anything for me. They did. They loved me in the way they knew how. They helped with tuition for both of us. They let me live at home one summer without paying rent. They bought me a used car when I graduated. But help in our family was never measured the same way. What I received was remembered. What Daniel received disappeared into the background. When I was 23, after I graduated and started my first full-time job, my parents gave me $20,000. It was the largest amount of money they had ever given me. My father transferred it directly into my account. My mother sent me a message right after. Graduation gift. Pay down those loans and start clean. No strings. We're proud of you. I still remember sitting on the edge of my bed staring at that message. At 23, $20,000 felt enormous. I used almost all of it to pay down my student loans, exactly as my mother had suggested. I saved the rest for emergencies. Within 2 years, that money was gone. Not wasted. Gone in the normal way money disappears when it is used for the purpose it was given for. Loan payments, a medical deductible, a transmission repair, a deposit when I moved for work. By 26, there was nothing left of that transfer except the bank records. I did not know those bank records would matter 7 years later. Daniel's 20s went differently. Again, there was always a reason. He left college after 2 semesters because the program was not right for him. My parents paid his rent while he figured out what came next. Over the next several years, my parents repeatedly helped Daniel with work, cars, rent, his wedding, childcare, and moving costs. I rarely knew the exact amounts. I did not ask. At that stage of my life, I had convinced myself the healthiest thing was to stop keeping score. I was earning more than Daniel. I had no children. I did not have a spouse. I could handle myself. That was the sentence my parents used most often. You can handle yourself. For years, I heard it as a compliment. It took me a long time to understand that in our family, competence was treated like consent. If I could survive without something, then apparently I did not deserve it. If Daniel needed something, that need itself became an argument for why someone else should provide it. My first real fight with my parents about money happened when I was 28. Daniel and his wife had fallen behind on rent after he changed jobs. My mother called me on a Sunday afternoon and asked if I could send him $3,000. Not lend, send. I told her I could lend him $1,500 and he could repay it over a few months. She went quiet, then she said, "You have savings." I asked how she knew that. She said, "Because you're sensible." I remember that sentence because it revealed something I had never noticed before. My savings were not private in my parents' minds. They were just family resources that happened to be sitting in my account. I still lent Daniel $1,500. He repaid $800. Then his wife had a difficult pregnancy, and I told him to forget the rest. That became part of the family story too. Not that I had helped, that I had only helped a little. A year later, when I mentioned that I wanted to buy a house eventually, my mother said, "Why would you tie yourself down? You're single. Enjoy your flexibility." At the time, I thought she was giving advice, so I did not tell my parents when I opened a separate savings account for a down payment. I did not tell them when I started sending part of every paycheck into it. I did not tell them when I turned down vacations because I wanted the money more. I did not tell them when I spent 18 months driving a car that made a rattling sound every winter because I did not want another payment. I did not tell them when I changed jobs and negotiated a higher salary, partly because I had calculated exactly how much faster it would get me to my goal. The house became something private, not secret because I was ashamed. Secret because it was the first large goal I had ever had that was not connected to what my family needed from me. By 32, I had enough for a strong down payment and closing costs, but I waited. Interest rates were moving. Inventory was strange. I lost one house after an inspection found foundation problems. I lost another because another buyer offered more than I was willing to pay. Then I found the one I eventually bought. It was a 3-bedroom brick house on a quiet street with a small yard and a maple tree that dropped leaves across the driveway faster than I could sweep them. The kitchen was dated. One bathroom needed work. The basement smelled faintly like old cardboard. I loved it immediately. Not because it was perfect, because I could afford it without becoming afraid of my own mortgage. The purchase price was $412,000. I put down $82,400. Every dollar of that down payment came from my savings. Closing costs came from another account I had built separately. The mortgage was in my name. The deed was in my name. The inspection, insurance, taxes, and utilities were all mine. I did not ask my parents for anything. I did not ask Daniel for anything. I did not even ask anyone to help me move until after closing. When the keys were placed in my hand, I sat in my car in the driveway for almost 10 minutes before going inside. I did not cry. I thought I would. Instead, I felt quiet. That house was the first thing in my adult life that represented years of choices nobody else had seen. I had bought a dining table months before I bought the house because it was on sale, and I had measured the space from the listing photos. The first night, I ate takeout at that table with one lamp plugged into the wall because most of my boxes were still unopened. I remember looking around and thinking, I did this. That feeling lasted 3 days. Then I sent the photos to my family. My father replied with a thumbs up. Daniel wrote, "Nice place." My mother called, "It's bigger than I expected." Then came the sentence, "That should really go to Daniel." I told myself it was one bad comment. The following weekend, my parents came to see the house. Daniel did not come. He said one of the kids had a cold. My mother walked through every room slowly. She stood in the second bedroom and said, "This would be perfect for Emma." Emma was Daniel's daughter. I said, "It's going to be my office." She looked disappointed. In the third bedroom, she said, "And this could be Noah's." I said, "Mom." She said, "I'm just saying." My father was quieter, but he was doing something that bothered me more. He kept asking financial questions. How much had I put down? What was the mortgage? What were the property taxes? Was there an early repayment penalty? Had I fixed my rate? At first, I answered because these were normal questions coming from a father who had always liked numbers. Then he asked, "Could the mortgage be assumed by someone else?" I said, "Why?" He shrugged. "Just curious." That evening, my mother called again. She said Daniel and his wife were having trouble with their landlord. Their rent was going up when the lease renewed. The townhouse felt too small. The school district was not as good as the one I had bought into. She said, "You work from home 3 days a week. You don't need to be there." I said, "I bought this house to live in it." She said, "Nobody said you couldn't own something. We're talking about what makes sense." I asked what exactly she was suggesting. She said, "Daniel could live there and cover the mortgage. You could rent a smaller place, or maybe eventually transfer it once he's stable." I actually pulled the phone away from my ear and looked at it. I thought maybe I had misunderstood. I said, "You want me to move out of my house so Daniel can live here?" She answered, "When you say it like that, of course it sounds bad." There is a phrase people use when they want the problem to be your tone instead of their request. "When you say it like that." I asked her how I was supposed to say it. She sighed. "Claire, he has children." "I know. You don't." "I know. You can buy again." That sentence changed something in me. Not because she was shouting. She was not. My mother almost never shouted. She said it calmly as if the math was obvious. Daniel had children. I did not. Therefore, my house was more valuable in his hands. I said, "No." She asked, "No to what?" "All of it." There was a long pause. Then she said, "Think about it before you get defensive." I ended the call. 2 days later, Daniel texted me. "Mom says you're upset about the house idea." I stared at the message for a minute before answering. "What house idea?" He wrote, "Us renting yours for a while." That was the first time I realized my parents had not presented it to him as a wild suggestion. They had presented it as a plan. I asked, "Did Mom tell you I agreed to that?" He said, "Not exactly." "Then what did she tell you?" He did not answer for almost an hour. Then he wrote, "She said you'd probably be okay with it once we worked out the numbers." I called him. Daniel sounded uncomfortable but not shocked. He said Mom and Dad had been talking about my house since I told them I had closed. He said they believed it was unfair that I had so much space, while his family was cramped. He told me they had suggested he could pay me something close to my mortgage, and then, maybe after a few years, we could figure out ownership. I asked him one question. "Did you think I wanted this?" He hesitated. That hurt more than if he had lied. Finally, he said, "I thought you might. You're not attached to stuff the way Mom is." I said, "Daniel, I saved for 6 years." He got defensive. "I'm not trying to take anything from you." "Then why are we having this conversation?" "Because Mom brought it up." "Did you tell her no?" Another pause. "No." That was our family in one word. No. He had not told her no because the idea benefited him. My parents had not told themselves no because they believed my ability to recover made the request acceptable. And I had spent years saying yes often enough that all of them seemed genuinely surprised when I finally stopped. For the next 2 weeks, the pressure came in layers. My father sent me a spreadsheet. He had calculated what Daniel could afford monthly. He had included a line for future equity adjustment. I called him and asked what that meant. He said, if Daniel pays the mortgage for several years, obviously we'd need to account for the equity he creates. I said, he is not moving into my house. My father said, nobody is forcing you. That sentence would become almost funny later. At the time, it made me furious. My mother sent me listings for one-bedroom condos near my office. She wrote, something like this would suit you perfectly. I did not answer. She sent another. Then another. I muted the family group chat. A week later, my parents came over without calling first. I saw them through the front window and almost did not open the door. My father said they wanted to clear the air. My mother had brought food. That was how conflict worked in our house. Nobody apologized. Someone brought food. We sat at my dining table. My father said, this has gotten more emotional than it needs to be. I said, I agree. He nodded as if we were finally making progress. Then he said, so let's discuss it rationally. He laid out 3 options. Option 1, Daniel and his family rented the house from me at below market rent. Option 2, Daniel paid my mortgage directly and built an ownership stake over time. Option 3, I sold the house to Daniel for roughly what I had paid, with my parents helping him finance the difference. I asked, where is the option where I live in the house I bought? My mother looked hurt. She said, why are you making this so hard? That was the moment I stopped trying to explain. I had been answering the wrong question. I kept explaining why I deserved my own house. They were asking how much pressure it would take before I surrendered it. I said, there is no arrangement. Daniel is not moving in. I am not selling to him. I am not transferring equity. This conversation is over. My father's expression changed. He said, you need to be careful about talking like you did everything alone. I asked what that meant. He said, your mother and I helped you get where you are. I said, of course you did. You're my parents. He said, exactly. Something about the way he said it made me sit back. My mother looked at him, not surprised, almost relieved that he had finally said the part they had been circling. My father continued, we gave you $20,000 when you finished school. I said 7 years ago. He said, family money helped put you in a position to buy this house. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, because I could not understand how we had arrived there. That money paid my student loans. It freed up your income later. So every dollar you gave me in my 20s gives you a claim on everything I buy forever? Don't be dramatic. I asked him what he was saying. He looked directly at me and said, I'm saying this is not as simple as you pretending the property has nothing to do with us. I stood up. I told them the visit was over. My mother started crying. Not loudly. She had a way of becoming wounded at exactly the moment someone else set a boundary. She said, we would never do this to you. I asked, do what? Turn family into money. I remember thinking that sentence was so backwards, I did not even know how to answer it. They had come into my house with a plan to redistribute it to my brother. I had said no, and somehow I was the person turning family into money. After they left, I locked the door and stood with my hand on the deadbolt. That was the first night the house did not feel completely safe, not physically unsafe, emotionally invaded. Every room they had walked through now felt like something they had appraised. My office was Emma's future bedroom. The guest room was Noah's. My mortgage was Daniel's potential equity. My down payment was apparently evidence of family resources. Even my independence had been rewritten as something my parents had financed. I called a friend named Rachel, who had known my family since college. I told her everything. She listened quietly. Then she asked, do you have the message from when they gave you that $20,000? I said, probably. She said, find it. Rachel is not a lawyer. She just has a very good memory. I searched my old phone backups and found the message. Graduation gift. Pay down those loans and start clean. No strings. We're proud of you. I took a screenshot. Then I logged into my bank and started pulling old statements. I did not know yet that I would need them. I just knew that for once I wanted my own record of what had actually happened. The transfer came in on June 14th. Within 3 business days, I had sent $14,800 to my student loan account. Over the next year, the remaining money disappeared into normal expenses. I downloaded every statement I could. I put them in a folder on my laptop called House. Then I went through the documents from closing: purchase contract, settlement statement, mortgage documents, wire confirmation for the down payment, proof of funds, insurance. I put everything in the folder. That weekend, my mother called. I did not answer. She texted, "Your father is very hurt." I did not answer. Then Daniel called. I answered because part of me still hoped he would say the one thing I wanted to hear. This has gone too far. He almost did. He said, "I told them to leave it alone." I asked, "When?" "Yesterday." "Why yesterday?" He sighed. "Because Dad talked to someone." I felt my stomach tighten. What does that mean? "He asked a lawyer about the money they gave you." I stood up from my desk even though I had nowhere to go. Daniel said, "I don't think anything is going to happen. He's just angry." I said, "Daniel, did you ask them to stop because this is wrong, or because you think they're making things messy?" He said, "Does it matter?" "Yes." Another pause. He said, "I don't know." That answer told me more than I wanted to know. A few days later, my father emailed me. The subject line was family resolution. The message was formal, too formal. He wrote that he and my mother wanted to avoid unnecessary conflict and believed we should document a fair arrangement regarding the house. He referred to the $20,000 as an early family contribution. That phrase had never been used before. He claimed it had been given with the expectation that it would help me establish long-term stability. That part was technically true in the broadest possible sense. Then he made the leap. He said because their financial support had helped me build the savings and credit profile that later made the house possible, they believed the family had an equitable interest in the property. I read that sentence 3 times. Then I forwarded the email to a lawyer. Her name was Maya Chen. A coworker had used her for a property dispute and recommended her. When we met, I brought a printed folder so thick I felt ridiculous carrying it. Maya did not laugh. She asked me to tell the story from the beginning. Not from childhood, from the money. When was the $20,000 transferred? Was there a written loan agreement? No. Any repayment schedule? No. Any document saying it was for a future home? No. Any document saying my parents would receive an ownership interest? No. Did they contribute to the down payment? No. Closing costs? No. Mortgage payments? No. Renovations? No. Property taxes? No. Were they on the deed? No. Had Daniel contributed anything? No. Had I ever promised the property to him? No. Had I ever agreed he could move in? No. Then she asked the question that mattered. What do they have in writing? I showed her my father's email. Then I showed her my mother's old text. Maya read it twice. No strings, she said. Yes. And you used the money for student loans? Yes. Can you prove that? I opened the statements. She nodded. For the first time in weeks, I felt my shoulders lower. Maya did not tell me there was 0 risk. Good lawyers do not speak that way. She said people can file claims even when the facts are weak. She said family disputes become complicated because people often remember conversations differently. She told me not to delete anything, not to argue by text, not to sign anything, not to let anyone move into the property, and most importantly, not to keep trying to win the emotional argument. From this point, she said, you do not need them to agree with you. That sentence stayed with me. I did not need them to agree with me. My whole life, I had been trying to make my parents understand why I wanted fairness, understand why I needed boundaries, understand why Daniel could not always be the exception, understand why being capable did not make me less deserving. I had mistaken understanding for permission. A week later, Maya sent a letter to my parents' lawyer denying their claim. For a few days, everything went quiet. Then the pressure spread through relatives. My mother's version made it sound as if I had turned a family disagreement into a legal war. I stopped correcting every person who called. My answer became simple. I'm not discussing it through relatives. For 3 weeks, nothing happened. I started painting the guest room. I bought bookshelves for my office. I replaced the old kitchen faucet. I tried to make the house feel like mine again. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, someone knocked on the door. I thought it was a delivery. It was a process server. There are moments when your body understands something before your mind does. I saw the envelope, I saw my name, I saw my parents' names, and I knew. I thanked the man, closed the door, sat down on the stairs, and opened the papers. My parents had filed a civil claim asking the court to recognize an interest connected to the property. The wording was more careful than anything they had said to me. They alleged that years of financial support, including the $20,000 transfer, had been provided as part of a broader family understanding that major assets acquired with the benefit of that support would remain available for family needs. They claimed I had acknowledged this family understanding in conversations. They claimed they had encouraged and supported my financial progress in reliance on it. And they claimed my refusal to allow Daniel's family to benefit from the house was inconsistent with those expectations. There was also one paragraph that made my hands shake. It said I had previously represented that I would always make sure Daniel and his children had a home if they needed one. I knew exactly where that came from. 3 years earlier, during a Christmas dinner, Daniel had been talking about how unstable his job felt. My mother had started crying because she was worried about the kids. I had said, "He's my brother. If something really happened, I'd never let the kids end up homeless." That was it. A promise made at a dinner table that I would not let my niece and nephew sleep on the street had somehow become evidence that my house was a family asset. I called Maya. She told me to email everything immediately. Then she said, "Do not call your parents." I said I wasn't going to. I was lying. I had already picked up my phone twice. I wanted to ask them what they were doing. I wanted to ask my mother how no strings had become an ownership claim. I wanted to ask my father how a graduation gift had turned into a legal theory. I wanted to ask Daniel how far he was willing to let this go. Instead, I sent the documents to Maya. That evening, Daniel called me. I watched his name flash on the screen until the call ended. Then he called again. I answered. He said, "I didn't know they were actually filing." I said nothing. He continued. "I swear, Claire, I didn't ask them to do this." I asked, "Are you going to benefit if they win?" He was quiet. "That's not fair." "It's a question. They're not suing for the house to be transferred directly to me." "Are you going to benefit?" He said, "They think there should be some kind of family arrangement." I laughed once. "Daniel, that is not an answer." He got angry. "Fine, yes, obviously it would help us, but that doesn't mean I told them to sue you." I said, "Then tell them you want nothing to do with my house." "I already told you I asked them to stop." "No, tell them you reject any claim that is supposed to benefit you." He said, "Why should I get in the middle?" That was the moment I finally understood my brother. He was not the mastermind. He was not manipulating my parents from the shadows. He was something more ordinary. He was comfortable enough with a lifetime of preference that he could recognize something was wrong without being willing to give up the advantage. He wanted to remain innocent and available for the reward. I said, "You're already in the middle." Then I ended the call. The months that followed were exhausting in the most boring way possible. Court disputes in real life are not two people making dramatic speeches every day. They are emails, documents, deadlines, questions you have to answer carefully, old records you did not know you would need. Conversations you replay because now every sentence feels like evidence. My parents produced statements from relatives saying our family had always believed in helping each other with major assets. They included examples. My parents had helped an aunt with a down payment. My grandfather had let a cousin live in a house he owned. My parents had co-signed one of Daniel's car loans. All of it proved we were a family that sometimes helped each other. None of it proved my house belonged to them. Then they produced screenshots. One was from a family group chat after Daniel's second child was born. My mother had written, "We'll all make sure these babies always have what they need." I had replied with a heart. That heart emoji was in a legal filing. I wish I were joking. Another was a message I sent Daniel after he lost his sales job. "If you're ever in real trouble, call me. We'll figure it out." That became evidence of an alleged ongoing commitment. Maya kept bringing me back to the same distinction. Helping someone is not the same as giving them ownership. Family generosity is not a deed. Love is not a mortgage. Need is not title. Meanwhile, my own records were cleaner than I had realized. The down payment had come from an account that showed years of payroll deposits and automatic transfers. There was no large family deposit before closing. No unexplained money, no contribution from my parents, no contribution from Daniel. The $20,000 from 7 years earlier could be traced. The old bank statement showed it arriving. The student loan records showed most of it leaving. My mother's message described it as a graduation gift and said, in words that could not have been clearer, "No strings." But there was another piece of evidence I had forgotten about. An email from my father. 2 months after the original $20,000 transfer, I had emailed him, thanking him and Mom again. I wrote, "I'm down to a manageable loan balance now. I know that gift changed everything." He replied, "That's what it was for. Fresh start. Don't pay us back. Just be smart." Maya called me when she found it in the documents I had sent. "This is helpful," she said. Helpful sounded too small. To me, it felt like hearing my father from the past testify against the man he had become in the present. Do not pay us back. Just be smart. I had been smart. That was the problem. I had become stable enough that my family thought my stability should be redistributed. Before the main hearing, there was an attempt to settle. My parents' proposal was essentially the original plan with legal language around it. Daniel would move in, pay an agreed amount, build some equity over time, and my parents would withdraw the claim. I asked where I was expected to live. My mother had brought listings for smaller condos. That ended any remaining doubt. This was not really about tracing old money. They believed I had bought more house than I needed, and that Daniel's need gave the family a right to rearrange my life. The mediation ended without an agreement. As we were leaving, my father said my name in the hallway. I stopped. He said, "If this goes in front of a judge, a lot of private family things are going to come out." It sounded like a threat. Maybe he intended it as one. I said, "Then tell the truth." He looked away first. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. I did not sleep well the night before. For all the confidence I had developed from the documents, court still scared me. There is something unnatural about seeing your parents' names on the opposite side of a case. I kept thinking of ordinary memories. My father teaching me to ride a bike, my mother staying up with me when I had the flu, family vacations, birthday cakes. The first time my father showed me how to make a budget. People want betrayal stories to be simple. They want the bad person to be bad in every memory. Real families are harder. My parents had loved me. They had also built a system where my brother's need repeatedly outranked my ownership of my own choices. Both things were true. That morning, I put on a Navy suit, drove to the courthouse, and met Maya outside. Daniel was already there. So was his wife. He looked at me, then looked down. My parents sat with their lawyer. My mother did not make eye contact. The judge was a woman in her late 50s with a calm voice and no visible interest in anybody's family mythology. That became important. My whole life, when we argued inside the family, the rules came with history attached. Daniel is struggling. Claire is strong. Mom worries. Dad sacrificed for everyone. The children need stability. Family helps family. Inside that courtroom, none of those sentences carried automatic authority. They were just claims. The case began with my parents' side explaining the alleged family understanding. Their lawyer did a professional job with weak facts. He did not say, "Our son deserves the house." Of course not. He argued that my parents had contributed substantially to my financial foundation over the years, and believed those contributions were made in reliance on a long-standing understanding that the family would use major resources cooperatively. He referred to the $20,000. He referred to tuition support. He referred to my statements about helping Daniel. He referred to family history. Then my father testified. He said he and my mother had always tried to create security for both children. He said the $20,000 had been intended to help me establish myself. He said there had always been an understanding that we would help one another. Then he said something that changed the atmosphere. He said, "Claire has always been better with money. Daniel has a family, and we believed she understood that certain resources would naturally be more useful to him." The judge looked up, not dramatically, just a small change in attention. She asked, "When you say certain resources, are you referring to the property at issue?" My father said, "Yes, among other things." The judge asked, "Was your name ever on the title?" "No." "Your wife's?" "No." "Your son's?" "No." "Did you contribute funds at closing?" My father paused, not directly at closing. "Did you make mortgage payments?" "No." "Property taxes?" "No." "Insurance?" "No." The judge nodded and looked down at her notes. My father's lawyer redirected him toward the $20,000 gift. He asked what my father intended when he transferred it. My father said, "To help her build a stable future." That phrase sounded careful. Then Maya showed him the email. "Don't pay us back, just be smart." She asked if he wrote it. He said yes. She asked whether he had included any condition. He said no. She asked whether there had been a document saying he would own part of any future house. No. A document saying Daniel would? No. A document saying the money had to remain invested for a house? No. Then she asked whether he knew I had used most of the money to pay student loans shortly after receiving it. He said he did. "So, at the time, you approved of that use?" "Yes." "And 7 years later, when Claire bought this house, did you transfer money toward the purchase?" "No." That was the first time I saw my father look uncertain. My mother testified next. Her testimony was more emotional. She talked about Daniel's children. She talked about the rent increase. She talked about how difficult it was for young families. She said I had 3 bedrooms and lived alone. She said Daniel's children needed a yard. Maya asked, "Did Claire ever agree to transfer the house to Daniel?" My mother said, "Not in those words." "Did she agree he could move in?" She initially became defensive. "That wasn't my question." "No." "Did she agree he would build equity?" "No." "Did she agree to sell him the house?" "No." "Did she agree that the $20,000 graduation gift gave you an ownership interest in property she might buy years later?" My mother looked at me for the first time. Then she said, "Families don't always put everything in contracts." That sentence hung in the room. Maya answered softly, "No, they don't." Then she showed my mother the old text, "Graduation gift. Pay down those loans. No strings. We're proud of you." My mother confirmed she had sent it. Maya asked, "What did no strings mean?" My mother said, "At the time, it meant we weren't asking her to repay us." "At the time?" "Yes." "What changed?" My mother looked toward Daniel. It was only a second, but everyone saw it. She said, "Circumstances." Maya asked, "Daniel needed a larger house?" My parents' lawyer objected to the phrasing. The judge allowed Maya to continue more carefully. She asked whether Daniel's housing situation played a role in my parents' request. My mother said yes. Then Maya asked, If Claire had purchased a one-bedroom condominium instead, would you have brought this claim? My mother did not answer immediately. Finally, she said, "Probably not." I felt something inside me go still. There it was, not hidden in an email, not buried in family history. The whole thing reduced to one answer. Probably not. If I had bought less, they would have left me alone. Because I had bought something useful to Daniel, my parents had decided their old gift meant something new. Daniel testified too. I had not expected that part to hurt as much as it did. He was nervous. He kept rubbing his thumb along the edge of the witness stand. My parents' attorney asked about our family culture of helping one another. Daniel said we had always helped each other. He mentioned the $1,500 I had lent him. He said I had told him to forget the unpaid balance. He mentioned my Christmas statement that I would never let his children become homeless. Then Maya asked him questions. Before Claire bought this house, had she ever told you she was buying a home for your family? No. Had she told you she was buying a home you would eventually own? No. Did you contribute to her down payment? No. Did you pay closing costs? No. Did you make mortgage payments? No. Did Claire ever ask you to? No. Before your parents suggested it, had you ever believed you had a claim to Claire's house? Daniel looked down. No. After your parents suggested you might move into it, did you tell Claire you understood she had not agreed? He hesitated. Yes. Did you tell your parents you rejected any ownership interest in her property? Another pause. No. Why not? My parents' lawyer objected. The judge allowed him to answer if he knew. Daniel said, "Because I thought if there was a way to make it work, it would help my family." Maya nodded. That is understandable, but helping your family and owning your sister's house are different things, correct? Daniel said, yes. That was the first time he had said it plainly. I did not feel victorious. I felt tired. My testimony came last. Maya asked me to walk through the purchase. I explained the savings account, the automatic transfers, the down payment, the closing, the mortgage. She introduced the records. Then she asked about the $20,000. I explained when I received it and how I used it. She showed the loan payments, the bank statements, my mother's text, my father's email. Then she asked about the Christmas comment. Did you say you would never let your brother's children become homeless? Yes. What did you mean? I meant that if they were ever truly in danger of having nowhere to sleep, I would help. I meant what I said. Did you mean you were giving Daniel ownership of any future property? No. Did you mean he could choose to live in a house you later purchased? No. Did you mean your parents could decide what property you would provide? No. Then my parents' attorney questioned me. He asked whether I believed family should help family. I said yes. He asked whether my parents had helped me financially. I said yes. He asked whether their help had made my early adult life easier. I said absolutely. He asked whether I was financially better off than Daniel. I said probably. He asked whether I had 3 bedrooms. I said yes. He asked whether Daniel had 2 children. Yes. Then he asked, so would it be fair to say that you are in a better position to obtain alternate housing than your brother? Maya objected. There was discussion about relevance. The judge allowed a limited answer. I said, I may be in a better position financially. I don't believe that gives him ownership of my house. The judge looked at me, then at my parents, then at the attorneys. She asked a question herself. Is there any evidence that the $20,000 transfer was made in connection with the purchase of this specific property? My parents' lawyer said the argument was that the support contributed to my overall financial position. The judge repeated the question. Any evidence tying that transfer to the purchase of this property? There was silence. No direct evidence, Your Honor. Any written agreement concerning shared ownership? No. Any evidence the plaintiffs made payments toward acquisition or maintenance of the property? No. Any evidence the defendant promised to convey an ownership interest? The lawyer referred to the family messages and statements. The judge said, "A promise to help relatives in a hardship is not, on its face, the same as a promise to convey real property." That was the first sentence from the judge that made my mother visibly react. She leaned toward my father and whispered something. The judge continued asking questions. She wanted dates, amounts, documents. She was not interested in who had more bedrooms than children. She was not interested in whether Daniel's rent had increased. She was not interested in whether my parents believed I could buy another house someday. Every question stripped away one layer of the family story until only the ownership facts remained. Whose name was on the deed? Mine. Who paid the down payment? I did. Who signed the mortgage? I did. Who was legally responsible for the debt? I was. Who paid the property costs? I did. What written condition had been attached to the old graduation gift? None. What happened to that money? Most of it paid student loans years before the house purchase. What evidence showed an agreement to transfer the property? There was none. At one point, my mother asked through her lawyer if she could clarify something. The judge allowed it. My mother said, "We are not trying to steal from our daughter." The judge waited. My mother continued, "We are trying to make sure our son's family has stability. Claire is fortunate. She has always been fortunate in that she is capable. Daniel has had a harder road." I looked down at the table. I had heard versions of that speech my entire life. Claire is capable. Daniel has had a harder road. I expected the judge to stop her. She did not. She let my mother finish. Then she asked, "Mrs. Bennett, do you understand that the question before the court is not which of your children would benefit more from the property?" My mother said, "Yes," but she did not sound as if she did. The judge asked, "Do you understand that one adult child's greater need does not by itself create a property interest in an asset owned by another adult child?" My mother's face changed. There was no yelling, no gavel, no dramatic music, just a sentence. A simple sentence from someone who had no reason to protect our family's old rules. Greater need does not create ownership. My mother said, "I understand." The judge said, "I'm not sure the evidence shows that you did when this action was filed." My father looked straight ahead. The ruling came after a short recess. I sat in the hallway with Maya. My hands were cold. Daniel came out of another door and stood 20 feet away. For a moment, I thought he might walk over. He did not. When we returned, the judge went through the claim carefully. She found that my parents had not established an ownership interest in the property. The $20,000 transfer had been documented contemporaneously as a gift. The evidence showed it had been used substantially for student loan repayment years before the home purchase. There was no written agreement tying that money to the property. There was no credible evidence of a promise to transfer ownership to my parents or Daniel. General statements about family support did not establish a right to the house. My parents' claim failed. That was it. Months of emails, years of family history, a stack of documents, a courtroom full of people. And in the end, the part that mattered was remarkably plain. They had helped me in the past. That did not make them owners of my future. They loved my brother. That did not make him owner of my house. He had children. I did not. That did not change the deed. My mother cried quietly when we walked out. My father was furious. He told their lawyer he wanted to discuss options. I did not stay to hear them. Maya and I walked toward the elevators. Just before the doors opened, I heard Daniel call my name. I turned. He looked exhausted and he said, "I'm sorry." I waited. He said, "I should have shut it down at the beginning." I said yes. He flinched. I almost rescued him from the discomfort. That was my instinct. Tell him it was okay. Tell him I knew he had not filed the lawsuit. Tell him our parents were the ones who pushed it. Tell him I understood. Instead, I let the silence sit there. Daniel said, "I really didn't think it would go this far." I said, "That's because you didn't have anything to lose if it did." He looked at me. I could see he understood. maybe for the first time. The elevator opened. I stepped inside. I said, "Take care of your family, Dan." Then the doors closed. Winning the case did not repair anything. That surprised some relatives. They thought the moment the judge ruled, the family would reset. My mother called 2 days later. I did not answer. She left a voicemail saying she hoped we could put the legal misunderstanding behind us. Legal misunderstanding, that was what she called it. Not the lawsuit, not the attempt to create ownership from a gift, not the months of pressure, a misunderstanding. My father emailed me that evening. He said the court had decided the legal issue but had not addressed the moral issue. I read the email once, then archived it. I did not answer. For years, I had believed every accusation deserved a response. If someone said I was selfish, I explained. If someone said I had more, I justified what I had worked for. If my parents said Daniel needed help, I searched for a version of help I could afford. The lawsuit cured me of that. Not because I stopped caring, because I finally understood that explanation can become a trap when the other person believes your boundary is a negotiation. I changed a few things. I removed my parents from the emergency access on one of my financial accounts. I updated the person listed as my emergency contact. I stopped discussing salary, savings, bonuses, mortgage payments, or home improvements with family. When relatives asked what I was spending on something, I learned to say, "I've got it handled." No number, no explanation, no spreadsheet. My parents were not banned from my life forever. I did not make a dramatic announcement. I did not send a final message listing every wrong thing they had done since childhood. I just stopped participating in the old structure. For several months, I kept my distance. Daniel eventually asked to meet for coffee. He told me he and his wife had renewed their lease and were saving for a down payment. Then he said something I had never heard from him before. "Mom and Dad taught me that when things got hard, somebody would fix them," he said. "And they taught you that you were supposed to be the somebody." I told him I did not hate him, but I would never again be his financial backup plan. If he wanted a relationship with me, it had to exist without access to my money or my house. He nodded. That's fair. For once, fairness meant he expected less from me, not that I gave more. My relationship with my parents changed more slowly. My father remained convinced I had humiliated them. He believed I could have prevented the court case by agreeing to some compromise. Technically, he was right. I could have prevented the entire lawsuit by surrendering part of what they wanted. That is true of many conflicts. The fact that submission ends a conflict does not mean submission was the fair solution. My mother tried a different approach. She sent sentimental messages, old photos, memories, a picture of me and Daniel as children holding hands at a zoo. For a while, I did not know how to respond. Then one day she wrote, "I miss my daughter." I replied, "I'm here, but our relationship has to be different." She asked what that meant. I said, "My money is not family money. My house is not family property. My choices do not require a vote." She did not answer for 2 days. Then she sent, "I never wanted you to feel used." I stared at that message for a long time. It was not an apology, but it was closer to accountability than anything she had said before. I replied, "I know, but I did." After that, we started speaking occasionally. Short calls, neutral topics, my garden, her doctor's appointment, my grandmother, books, weather. At first it felt artificial. Then I realized something. Healthy boundaries often feel artificial when you are used to relationships with none. About a year later, Daniel stood in my kitchen and said, "It's a good house. It suits you." A year earlier, everyone had looked at my home and imagined someone else in it. This time, my brother looked at the house and saw me. I still live there. The kitchen has been renovated now, although not as much as my mother once assumed I could afford. The guest room stayed a guest room. My office stayed mine. The maple tree still covers the driveway every fall. Sometimes, when I rake the leaves, I think about how close I came to making one more reasonable family compromise. Maybe I would have let Daniel move in temporarily. Maybe temporary would have become permanent. Maybe every mortgage payment would have started a new argument about equity. Maybe I would have spent years trying to prove that kindness was not consent. Instead, my parents made the dispute so extreme that they accidentally forced me to see it clearly. They sued me. They put their belief into legal language. They took the family rule I had lived under for years and placed it in front of someone outside the family. And outside the family, the rule sounded exactly as strange as it should have. My brother needs it more. She can recover. She is stronger. She has more. She can buy again. None of those sentences answered the only questions that mattered. Who bought the house? Who owned the house? Who had the right to decide what happened to it? For most of my life, I thought being the capable child meant I had a duty to absorb more pressure. I thought strength meant giving people one more chance, one more loan, one more explanation, one more compromise. I know differently now. Strength can also be keeping the thing you worked for. It can be saying no before resentment turns into hatred. It can be refusing to turn love into a financial obligation. It can be letting people be disappointed in you without rushing to fix their disappointment. My parents believed the house was the issue. It was never really the house. The house was just the first thing large enough for me to see the pattern written across it. For years, my brother's need had been treated like a claim. My stability had been treated like a surplus. And every time I gave in, the family learned the same lesson. Claire will handle it. Claire will understand. Claire can afford it. Claire will find another way. The lawsuit ended that lesson. The judge did not fix my family. She did something simpler. She refused to recognize our family hierarchy as ownership. That was enough. My parents spent years telling me Daniel needed more. When I finally bought something they could not redistribute with guilt, they tried to redistribute it with paperwork. They failed. And the strangest part is that I do not think of the court ruling as the moment I won. The real victory came later. It came the first time my mother asked what something cost and I did not tell her. It came when Daniel admitted I had been assigned the role of fixing his life. It came when I stood in my own kitchen without imagining who else my family thought deserved it. It came when I understood that gratitude does not require permanent access. My parents helped me when I was young. I am grateful. They gave me a generous graduation gift. I used it exactly as they intended at the time. They raised me and they loved me. And none of that means they own what I built afterward. Both truths can exist together. I can love people and still refuse their claim. I can appreciate what they gave me without surrendering everything I later gave myself. I can be the stronger child without being the family's spare wallet. And I can own a 3-bedroom house without having to prove that I need every bedroom more than someone else. Sometimes justice is dramatic. Sometimes it is a judge making a speech. Mine was quieter. Mine was a series of ordinary questions. Whose name is on the deed? Who paid the down payment? Who signed the mortgage? Who is responsible for the debt? Then one final truth my family had spent years avoiding. Need is not ownership. Love is not ownership. History is not ownership. And neither is guilt. I bought my own house. For a while, my family thought the word own only described the paperwork. Now I understand it differently. Owning something also means accepting that you are allowed to keep it. You are allowed to decide who enters. You are allowed to decide who benefits. You are allowed to say no without replacing the no with a softer offer. You are allowed to stop proving that your boundaries are reasonable to people who only consider them reasonable when they cost those people nothing. The house is still mine. But the bigger thing I took ownership of was my life.